Artificial intelligence. Everyone is learning prompt engineering, how to get their prompts effective, but few people are talking about and learning judgment when it comes to artificial intelligence. Now we know that AI can generate answers, but what it cannot do is determine what actually matters from the information that you receive. I am Dr. Sonia Daniels. I'm the founder and CEO at S. Daniels Consulting. And in our work, we help visionary leaders cultivate clarity. Now, we know that AI is something that conversations are just happening all the time, from your top news headlines to the public policy space in Project 2025. We're also seeing the top organizational blogs talk about artificial intelligence. And it's even a topic that is often talked about across social media, especially LinkedIn, where a lot of business and career topics are being discussed frequently. And so for me, as a business owner and as a consultant who helps organizations navigate not only growth and development, profitability and scalability, but also change management as well, artificial intelligence is something that is heavily being thought about and considered in my work as well. And so in this conversation today, which is more so kind of like podcast style, where I really just want to get my thoughts out, I want to share something that has been heavy on my mind and bring it to the surface because it is probably on y'all's mind as well. And this is the intersection of artificial intelligence and judgment, essentially decision making and how we decide how to use the information we receive from artificial intelligence and if it is useful to what we are actually trying to accomplish within our organizations. So you'll see me looking over. I have a few notes I want to reference to kind of help me stay on track for this conversation. But there are a few things that I want to discuss in terms of leading human decision making in an AI powered workplace. So that is the center of today's conversation. Now, one, I believe that AI is posing a new leadership challenge. And I think that leaders are trying to catch up with it as quickly as AI is being integrated into all of these systems that we use to operate our businesses. Now, even for me as a owner of a micro boutique consulting firm, there are certain systems and tools that I use, technology tools, to run my business. I even got an email just the other day from QuickBooks saying that they are integrating AI into the QuickBooks system. Was I prepared for this? No. Am I curious about how this is going to function? Absolutely. And so I say that to say that there is a new leadership challenge being posed in conjunction with the quick development and the quick integration and adoption of artificial intelligence, specifically generative AI and large learning models. What I believe is happening is that AI is definitely making information abundant. So you can literally prompt your favorite AI tool and you will get a response. The question is this information actually accurate? I think what's been really interesting, what I've been seeing in the news headlines lately, is something called artificial intelligence hallucinations. I just saw an article recently from one of my local news channels here in Louisiana about attorneys being in their own practices essentially having AI hallucinations because they are misquoting or misciting different case law in their actual work as attorneys. And so they're being sanctioned, or even being, I guess, I don't know if they're being disbarred or sanctioned from practice. But even that in itself is very interesting when we talk about the development of artificial intelligence. Now, again, AI makes information abundant. The challenge here is that decision making still has to be human when we talk about the information that is being received from the prompts that we are putting into these artificial intelligence tools. What I believe will happen in the future of work, in the future of our industries, in the future of how we do business, is that the competitive edge will no longer be who has the most knowledge. I truly believe that the competitive edge in the near future will be who has the best discernment. And discernment is something that is a very interesting, I would say, human trait that I don't know if you can necessarily train people on how to be discerning based on the information that they're using in their work. Now, for me as a scholar, what is very helpful and having, studied in multiple degree programs, having studied research methods, one of the things that we were trained on is how to navigate the research space, and essentially how to navigate information, and then be able to deduce from that information what is actually reliable and what is actually valid information in order to state our case about a topic. This is where the scholars need to come to the front, because I believe that when we talk about the future of artificial intelligence and we talk about the future of work, I believe scholars will have the best opportunities to be able to navigate what information is actually accurate, valid, and reliable that is coming from these large language models. And so, what I want to say here is that there are a few areas where I find that artificial intelligence actually falls short, again, as a scholar, but also as a business owner who consults with other organizations. I believe that AI falls short when it comes to a few different elements. One is that although I believe AI is great at pattern recognition, the pattern recognition that it has, it creates results that lack the ability to understand nuances. I believe it lacks the ability to be able to understand correlation versus causation. And I also believe it lacks the ability to understand duality and the reality that two things can be true at the same time, even if they are contradictory to each other. And so I say that because I believe that the use of artificial intelligence and the information that is received from prompts lack are definitely fail in terms of long-term consequences. So I feel like artificial intelligence and our large language models, sorry, fall short of being able to kind of understand longitudinal thought or longitudinal intelligence. And because I believe that's because it just simply does not have enough information to piece together historical trends, patterns, things of that nature. I also believe that AI falls short in terms of organizational culture. And so, what's interesting here is that, and I do a workshop called Culture as Infrastructure, where it's important to understand that there are different elements of culture that really support the growth and the success of an organization, such as how team members navigate their work and how they relate to other team members, what communication looks like, how leaders are able to navigate change effectively. I believe those are some key elements of culture that is sometimes rarely discussed. And so the problem with AI is that although it is giving us information, I believe it's not fully considering organizational culture and how to be able to not only build a foundation of culture, but how to also navigate all of the moving pieces that play a role in a healthy organizational culture. I believe AI also falls short in terms of ethics, in terms of context, and in terms of values as well. I definitely believe AI falls short in terms of context because I don't think it has a full grasp, especially whoever is training these large language models. I do not believe that those experiences of the people training the models can really speak to the full context of each individual perspective and our lived experiences, right? So one thing I try to prompt my AI to do is to adjust the way that it speaks for me, right? I try to train it to pick up on how I use my sentence structure or syntax. I try to train it to pick up on linguistics and how I speak. So I'm from South Louisiana. And so here we have, I believe we have a really unique way of speaking here in Louisiana. And so I tried to train it on how to sound like me, essentially. It had a very hard time breaking it on its own language patterns to be able to sound like me. And so when we talk about context, I believe that's just one of many contextual areas where AI falls short because it's not able to pick up on those lived experiences because it's essentially not a human. It hasn't experienced human things, and so it's not able to really talk in detail about different contexts of different elements of the human experience in the workplace. And so that's another thing I want to notate as well. One thing I find very interesting when I am building like social media posts, or I'm like trying to figure out how to play around with it, is that it does not do a good job at storytelling. It doesn't do a good job at telling stories because it does not only have that information, but because it hasn't experienced those things in order to be able to tell a full story. And so I feel like that's been really interesting in terms of just like context in terms of AI and where it falls short. So I can go into depth about this, but of course I don't want to get off track about it. I think another thing that has been really interesting when we talk about the usage of AI, especially in workplaces, is the risk of over reliance on using AI tools. And so there are a few areas I want to talk about when we talk about the over reliance of people using AI, especially in the workplace, just in the professional space in general, or in the corporate space. One of the things that I have found very interesting is that it does lead to the erosion of critical thinking if we are over reliant on constantly prompting an AI tool to tell the stories of our work and the experiences of our work and the results that we get from our work. I find that to be something that I am noticing in a lot of spaces, but even just in conversations with people. Again, just a lack of critical thinking, a lack of being able to understand nuances of different situations, understanding the layers of different situations as well. I think that is becoming a even bigger challenge when we talk about just how much workplaces are relying on artificial intelligence. There's been a few different stories I've been reading lately, which to me are starting to pose kind of like ethical questions in terms of the over reliance of artificial intelligence. One comes from the situation with the Workday lawsuit, where the way that the system or the platform is built out is that the artificial intelligence that is embedded into the Workday platform is using pattern recognition to reject candidates from jobs based on, I guess, what it believes will make an employee not successful in a role. And so that has been what is becoming essentially a discriminatory practice because of the use of AI in that system. That is a challenge. Another article I recently read, it was another company, I believe it was Meta, who used AI to decide they were going to lay off. I think they did about 4,000 layoffs. And so as a result of that, what they ended up doing was, I guess, prompting their own internal HR AI system to determine who they were going to lay off in their reduction in workforce. Now, both of those are really challenging when we talk about the over reliance of artificial intelligence, because it not only becomes a compliance issue, it also becomes an ethics issue as well. And then I think another piece of it is that it essentially starts to decline organizational trust because of the overuse of AI. And I think we're at a point in society where people don't even know which organizations to trust, because what is it that these organizations are actually doing if they're not just spitting out information from something that they prompt into, whichever AI tool that they use. And so I think that's an issue as well. One of the other over reliance issues that shows up in artificial intelligence is false confidence in AI outputs. Again, this goes back to when we talk about the ability to decipher information based on if the information is reliable and valid information. And I don't necessarily know if humans have a full grasp of fully being able to discern and judge which information they're receiving is actually factual versus which information they're receiving that is not fully accurate, or folks not doing their own due diligence and double checking the information that is coming out of artificial intelligence to understand, is that something that is actually true. I will say there has been quite a few instances where I have prompted artificial intelligence, and the results that it's given me have not been accurate information. It's made up names. It's made up articles. That's been one that's been really interesting to me. Is that seen it make up articles and then link it to something that wasn't even like an actual article. Is made up, like I mentioned, is made up names, is made up biographies of people who don't even exist. Which that to me in itself is like really wild. That something that we trust so much does not provide factual information. Even the other day, I prompted it to draft like an outreach template for me, an outreach email template, and it put a fake name on it. So it didn't even put the brackets of like insert name here. It put a fake name on it, and I was like, "Who is this person?" So I think even that has been really interesting when we talk about the over reliance of artificial intelligence, but especially just having false confidence in the AI outputs that it is giving us. Now, I will say this, there is a plethora of information everywhere. Every person on this earth doesn't know everything, and so every day we're coming across new information to us, right? Something that's new to us that if we're willing to, it will require us to learn it a little bit more and understand like what this information is, and then do we need to apply it to our life, or is it just new information? We let it pass through our brain and keep it moving. Is the information helpful? Does it need to be applied some way? Is it relatable? Whatever the case is. So I do recognize that information is abundant and information is everywhere. And every day as humans, we're coming across information and we're learning something new. The challenge here, though, is um where is the information coming from? What is the source of the information? And why does that information actually exist in the first place? And so I think when we talk about false confidence in AI outputs, a part of it is asking ourselves like what is the necessity of this information and why do we actually need it? So that is a part of it as well. I think another thing that is very interesting in this conversation is what should leaders do instead? And so I kind of talked about this a little bit, but I think one is important when we talk about the abundance of information that we are coming across in the artificial intelligence space is question the assumption. So question what it is actually giving us and why do we need to have it be a part of our work. So again, as a consultant, I will say it's really helpful for me when there are problems that I come up against in the strategy, in the change management, in the organizational development space. It's nice to be able to have a sparring partner that kind of helps me think through different levels of problems. Again, critical thinking though, right? Critical thinking and being able to understand nuance, I think is helpful for me because I am able to prompt it in a way that leads with nuance. And so the responses that I get are also nuanced responses as well. However, I cannot and will not trust the first piece of information that it gives me. And so that is why we talk about the necessity of human judgment at the intersection of the information that AI is giving us. I think it's also important to, as I mentioned, validate the recommendations. And so there's a concept in research methods called triangulation, where you are using different sources of research and knowledge to be able to validate a piece of information. So if AI is giving you let's say it's giving you a statistic, you want to be able to find three other sources that essentially confirm that that statistic is accurate. One of the things that grinds my gears when we talk about data itself is that I find that a lot of people actually misquote data because they'll take one statistic and then they'll run with that, not considering the need for triangulation. There are a lot of statistics, whether we talk about across public policy, whether we talk about in the workspace or the corporate space, whether we talk about in the criminal justice space, stats about like families, all of these things. I find that people go with the first statistic that they find and then run with that narrative instead of using triangulation as an opportunity to be able to validate the information that they're receiving. I would also say that it's important that leaders who have AI in their companies, in their workspaces, are able to ensure that they are applying human oversight to the information that they are receiving from the AI tool that they're using within their workplace. And so what I would say here is that if you already have, I'm going to say this because I know a lot of companies already have introduced different tools into their workspace. I believe it's important that every level of leadership or every level of your team members understand what they're using and then be able to have some level of human oversight that they apply to it so that they're just not going with the first thing that comes from the system that they're using. It's important here again that people also understand research methods. So perhaps, excuse me, perhaps there needs to be some type of integration of research methods into the recommendations that come from artificial intelligence. Excuse me. I would say here what's also important is the balance of efficiency with judgment. So just because something is fast, just because something is deemed efficient doesn't mean that it has been used with good judgment. I'll give you this example. Let's say I need to drive somewhere and I want to get there fast. I want to get there efficiently. So in Louisiana, most of the speed limits on the interstate are about 70 miles per hour in most places. And so if I need to get somewhere and I want to get there quickly, I can speed. That might not be the best use of judgment because then now I'm not only putting myself in danger or whoever's in the car with me, I'm putting other people on the road in danger as well. So, yes, I will get to my destination a lot quicker. Perhaps it might be more efficiently. It doesn't mean that I'm using good judgment to get there faster. That is an example I want to use, and I hope it translates to what I'm trying to say. That is an example I want to use, that there needs to be a balance of efficiency with judgment, and that just because you're doing something faster and it feels more efficient doesn't mean that it's being used with good judgment. And then I want to say that I think it is critical that leaders are ensuring that they are creating cultures that encourage critical thinking. Now, let me give y'all a definition of critical thinking because I want to not make any assumptions that everyone understands exactly what critical thinking is. And that's a facilitator in me because I like to create a foundation of understanding. So, critical thinking is the disciplined mental process of actively analyzing, evaluating, and synthesizing information to form logical and well reasoned judgments. It involves questioning assumptions, recognizing biases, and considering alternatives perspectives rather than simply accepting information at face value. Everything I've been saying today. Here are some core elements and necessary cognitive skills that are important when we talk about critical thinking. So, one, analysis, being able to break down complex claims, arguments, and text to understand how they are constructed. Evaluation, assessing the credibility of sources, the strength of evidence, and the validity of logic. Inference, drawing logical conclusions based on data and observations rather than guessing or reacting emotionally. And then self regulation, monitoring and reflecting one's own thinking processes called metacognition to catch personal biases and flawed logic. Now, self regulation is something that I do not hear talked about when we talk about um, artificial intelligence. The ability to be able to understand our own flawed logic and our own personal biases is a key part of being able to ensure that the information we're receiving from the prompts in artificial intelligence can be essentially analyzed or evaluated in a better space. I think one of the challenges with human usage of artificial intelligence is that I think humans rarely are interested in challenging our own flawed logic, or catching our own personal biases. And so that's another piece that intersects organizational culture as well. Because a huge part of organizational culture, when we talk about how people relate to each other in organizations, is also that people are able to understand their own personal biases and flawed logics when they are relating or interacting with other people in the workplace. And so I think those two things are kind of contradictory when now we are introducing artificial intelligence into workplaces where people haven't even challenged their own beliefs or thoughts about the way that they view the world. And I can see that being a huge challenge to how organizations function and a huge detrimental impact to the culture of companies. Now, some common applications when we talk about critical thinking is that it really has to support problem solving. So being able to identify the root cause of an issue rather than just treating symptoms or testing out potential solutions systemically. Now, this is something I would say that I find to be a common challenge in the social sector or the public sector when we talk about like the nonprofit space or the government space or the civic space, that in a lot of cases these spaces don't always consider the root cause issue. And a lot of times they're just treating symptoms of problems that humans are navigating. And so now when we talk about AI civics, which is a whole nother conversation, when we talk about AI civics and how civic leaders are using artificial intelligence, now we have to really interrogate, are we able to prompt artificial intelligence or build systems or tools that actually help identify the root cause issue instead of just treating the symptoms of like what we think something is. So that is something I'm actually really curious about in the public sector, in the civic space, when we talk about artificial intelligence. I think another piece of critical thinking when we talk about how it is incorporated into everyday scenarios is information literacy, which I talked a little bit about earlier, but being able to discern fact from opinion and then identifying misinformation or bias, particularly when consuming the news or social media. Now, we know this is a challenge. Like, we cannot deny that this is an actual challenge. And so that is where uh, using AI in the workplace needs a bit more support, not on the technical side, but on the human side of making sure that humans actually are able to navigate information literacy to be able to discern, is this information actually factual? Or am I able to acknowledge that it's essentially misinformation or it has some type of bias embedded into it? And the last piece for me, which is something I try to help leaders navigate a lot, is decision making. So being able to weigh the pros and cons and potential consequences before making personal or professional choices. This leads to, when we talk about decision making, the idea of judgment versus efficiency. Now, I know a lot of workplaces want to focus on efficiency. Everything needs to be urgent, everything needs to be fast. But if everything is fast and if everything is urgent, we are not taking the time to weigh the pros and the cons and the potential consequences. Now, I will say this is where consultants come in to help organizations, and I think as a consultant this is something I'm really good at, is helping organizational leaders really understand all of the potential consequences, both short term and long term, about what decisions are being made within the workplace. And so, again, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we need to be able to, because it is so fast and because it gives us information so quickly, we have to ask ourselves: are we taking time, or is there even a procedure or a process within organizations that allows them to be able to weigh the pros, to weigh the cons, and the potential consequences of the information that's actually being spit out from the AI tools. And so that is something I also wanted to highlight as well. Now, now that I said all of that, I think what I want to close out this video with is I want to talk about the future of work, the future of leadership, when we talk about artificial intelligence. Now, one, AI won't replace humans. Like, it won't. Like, as much as we try to talk about, like, the future of artificial intelligence, it cannot and will not replace leaders of organizations, because there always will have to be a human element leading work. So that is something that we won't have to worry about. I think what it will expose is weak decision making. And so, as I just briefly talked about, one of the things that organizations have to optimize for beyond efficiency, or maybe not even beyond efficiency, but in collaboration with efficiency, is slowing down enough to be able to weigh the pros and cons and the consequences. So I think if leaders are understanding that piece of the work, they'll be fine. The reality is, and I think I said this at the top of this conversation, is that the leaders who will thrive in the future when it comes to artificial intelligence are those who can pair artificial intelligence with discernment, with good decision making, and not be heavily reliant or dependent upon the use of artificial intelligence. And so I say all that to say and close out with this thought that the future does not belong to leaders who have the best prompts. It belongs to the leaders who have the best judgment. If there is something that resonated with you in this conversation or just in my brain dump today, please share your thoughts with me. I would love to hear them. And I hope that this was helpful and you got something or you took away something from it. And so, yes, let us be more responsible with the way we use AI, but ultimately, let's focus on discernment, judgment, and good decision making.